Today I'm going to discuss public policy, and in particular how political leaders and community engagement can influence it. To begin, let me tell you why I'm interested in this topic. My name is Amanda Shatzko, and currently I am a PhD student at UBC Okanagan, researching creativity and how it can influence and reform public policy and politicians. You see, outside of academic walls, I am also an artist, athlete, community advocate, and elected official. And at the intersection of all of them is policy. You may have first learned about policy in the same way that I have, when I found out that there are governing rules that can dictate what I can and can't do. So I decided to learn and figure out how they are made, and if possible, how and can they be changed if they no longer suited the needs of my community. Influencing policy change at its core is really about influencing social change. It involves altering human interactions and relationships that transform culture, social orders, behaviors, and institutions over time, impacting society. If you want equality, start by changing policy. If you want to improve the environment, change policy. And if you want a healthier community, you guessed it, change policy. Policies are a deliberate system of principles, procedures, and intentioned actions that can be found in organizations, businesses, and government. In the case of government, public policy is a course of actions, such as laws and regulations, that are a response to real-world problems. Public policies are drafted by policymakers in tandem with experts and stakeholders, influenced by public input, and are made official by political leaders who are the final decision makers. Deliberative democracy is a normative theory of collective decision-making that views decisions as legitimate to the extent that the views of those potentially affected have been considered through the process of public reasoning. It takes place in structured institutional forms such as courts, legislatures, and mini-publics, where elected officials receive various policy inputs and perspectives, and then weigh the reasons, deliberate, and make empowered collective decisions. Both epistemic and democratic grounds are used to legitimatize the process, while sometimes judgments on diverse and conflicting inputs can make a complex decision-making process. Within academic institutions, when a researcher is looking to implement community-based research, it is often due to the fact that they are lacking the perspective on the ground. Most scholars often hold a higher level approach, doing research on a particular community rather than with them. This can cause damage, such as a lack of trust, and sometimes misinterpretation of the community. To overcome this obstacle, community-based research can be implemented to do research with the community on the ground, empowering them and providing ownership into knowledge making and decisions being made. In the case of political leaders, they too can sometimes feel that they are only hearing the recommendations of policymakers and experts, and wish to get out of the elite bubble and onto the ground to talk and listen to everyday citizens to get their perspectives. Now, currently there are some public engagement tools that are being used by government in the policy-making process, such as public hearings, committees, master plans, open house events, and surveys. However, these forms of public engagement, according to politicians, can feel too formal and structured. Some of these forums also become soapboxes for loud interest groups to antagonize, vent, and battle the system with their biased opinions, rather than being a space for reasoned dialogue. Public participants have also been known to dominate the meetings, deteriorating the intention to hear diverse perspectives and representation. While scholars seek to remedy this issue with suggesting procedural innovations, political leaders will often take a pragmatic approach and seek out informal conversations with everyday people who are affected by their policy decisions, often testing and soliciting ideas in community spaces, such as coffee shops, markets, and sports games. Political leaders have to keep in mind that public dialogue and engagement is necessary to remain transparent to the public, building legitimacy and policy ownership, even if participants have clear agendas. If leaders and researchers are reaching out into the public for policy participation, all stakeholder parties should be aware that not one single method will ever result in a change in policy, but rather it takes a combination. Formal and informal interactions, as well as navigating the complex relationship between scientific evidence and political power. In policymaking, evidence is data on the nature and magnitude of a problem, and efficiency of various methods to reduce the problem, while power is simply the ability to influence the allocation of resources, engage players, and shape policy. Some policy partners led by academic researchers often unintentionally create processes that value evidence more highly than power, as well as some groups in power will insist that advocates for change need to present a higher than usual level of evidence in efforts to derail policy change. In some cases, partnerships may need to wield power to gain data, while in others, they need to use evidence to convince new players in power to join a coalition. Participatory researchers for public policies will need to develop the skills, theories, and methodologies that will allow them to function and be effective in the world of power, just as they do in the world of evidence. Something to keep in mind is that even though a political leader may have listened to a constituent's recommendation, it does not mean that they will directly take that up and act upon it. If the topic is sensitive or a difficult issue, the capacity of the political leader may be constrained by the realities and dilemmas of contemporary governance. As well, as much as the political leader will want the public to participate in the policy-making process, they will never truly relinquish their power to share fully in the decision-making process, as the political leader is legislatively the only governing body who has the decision-making power as elected by the people. Some skeptics of participatory forms of governing believe that leaders will only consult and engage the public if it will boost their popularity, win elections, or boost revenue. In addition, they believe that leaders use participatory mechanisms in order to pass the buck and avoid their responsibility of making tough decisions. At the same time, elected officials are concerned about the capacity and willingness of citizens to engage in complex policy debates. To mitigate this, elected officials are more supportive of inclusive and deliberative forms of public engagement if they are involved in the participatory design of the forum. Overall, most political leaders believe that public input is a valuable part of their executive decision-making, as it allows them to gather information and ideas, feel the pulse of the community, and gain a deeper understanding and appreciation of issues. However, future investigation into who participates in public policymaking and how should be further researched, as not everyone is comfortable or able to participate in formal public engagement forums or find the ear of a political leader walking by.